Interior Clark Home, Library, night. Hilde and Elise sit side by side at the table, thumbing through an Encyclopedia Britannica. They pause at a page with images of birds of the southwest. Interior Clark Home, Library, night. Mrs. Clark suddenly looms at the library doorway.
How dare you!
Hilde jumps up, while Elise just stares at Mrs. Clark, who then steps into the library.
But I'm off duty.
You'll be out in the streets if I catch you looking through our books again.
Elise is wide-eyed.
I thought...
You listen to me. Get out of here, and drag your girl with you.
Hilde's eyes moisten.
When I started this job, you told me...
Mrs. Clark scoffs.
Oh, I never told you that you had the run of the house after hours.
I promise it won't happen again. Please let us stay.
Hilde grabs the book from Elise's grip, places it on the shelf, then rushes Elise out of the room. Elise frowns at her mother. Interior, Clark Home, Hilde's room, night. Hilde is trembling. Elise has a long face.
Why did you let Mrs. Clark talk to you like that? She's mean.
I need this job.
Elise turns from her mother, then looks at their bookshelf. Interior, Clark Home, front doorway, night, same moment. Mr. Clark, late 50s, suit, tie, holding a briefcase, enters. Mrs. Clark approaches.
Oh, you wouldn't believe what that hussy...
Now, Abby, it's not kind to place such a harsh judgment on the young lady just because she made a mistake.
Mistake? She's an unwed mother. That's a sin.
Our church teaches forgiveness and...
You're always on the side of those people. She's disgraceful trash.
Interior, Clark Home, Hilde's room, night. The soft cadence of the disagreement between the Clarks turns to loud voices. The words disgraceful trash can be heard.
Elise, we're going to town next Saturday to the bookshop. They should have stocked Little House on the Prairie by now.
Elise smiles broadly, but her eyes are questioning. There's a slam of a distant door closing and no more arguing voices. Hilde picks up the Velveteen Rabbit, nodding towards the sink. Elise begins to brush her teeth. Quiet knock at their door. Hilde blanches. Elise turns around, still brushing. Hilde opens the door. It's Mr. Clark.
Excuse me, Hilde. I don't mean to disrupt your evening.
Hilde is open-mouthed. Elise sneaks up and hides behind her mother's skirt.
I can see I've startled you. That is not my intention. Can you step out in the hallway for a moment?
Mr. Clark smiles at Elise, who smiles back. Hilde, hands clasped in front of her, steps out as Mr. Clark backs out. Interior, Clark Home, hallway outside of Hilde's room, night. Hilde leaves her room door open, and Elise watches the conversation between her mother and Mr. Clark.
Yes, sir?
I'm not trying to frighten you.
A doubtful look crosses Hilde's face.
You probably heard Mrs. Clark and me having a rather loud discussion. I believe in education. When Mrs. Clark told me you and your, daughter were reading one of the encyclopedias, and that she forbade that, well, I disagreed.
Hilde's eyes are wide as saucers.
I'm trying to say that I give you to... What's your daughter's name?
Elise.
I give you and Elise permission to go into the library, after work hours and supper, of course, and look at any book you'd like. In fact, feel free to take books to your room. Just leave a note on the table if you do that.
Mrs. Clark will allow that?
I told her in no uncertain terms that you both are allowed there. Do you want to go ahead and get that encyclopedia you were just looking through?
Thank you, sir, but not tonight. We'll go take a look again tomorrow night after I'm done my chores.
Mr. Clark glances into Hilde's room.
I see you have the World Book Encyclopedia and a lot of children's books. You must love to read.
Yes, sir. So does Elise. I've read that encyclopedia back and forth. It's old, though, from 1917. My Aunt Clara gave it to me.
You two have a good night now.
Mr. Clark nods with a look of pleasant surprise in his eyes. Mr. Clark heads down the hallway. Hilde turns to enter her room, smiles broadly at Elise, who smiles back, then shuts the door.